Hello, this is Andrew Davey at Nevada Forward, and we're here with Brent Husson from Nevada Succeeds. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Great. So, to start with, what is it that your organization does, and what's the mission of Nevada Succeeds?
Well, Nevada Succeeds is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit, and I used to say that we tried to be a translator between business and education, helping those two different parts of our community speak to one another about the issues that matter. But we've moved on from that in the last couple of years. We think that business has been a much better partner in this work over the last few years. And now we're really getting into more policy. What K-12 policies can we implement that will actually help children learn more, and that's what we're focusing on now.
So, what policies are you looking at, especially now with Nevada's two largest school districts facing these chronic budget issues?
Sure. Well, there's several particular policies that we're looking at, but they all roll up into one main issue. And that is that we believe that if we're going to see education change for kids, that we have to see a change in the adults. And what we believe we need to do to make that happen is provide more supports at the systemic level for these adults, for not just teachers, but administrators and support staff and other licensed professionals.
So, what would you like to see changed in terms of professional development?
Well, we would like to see We'd like to see professional development become more aligned with aligning the incentives for teachers with what the system needs. And what I mean by that is, right now, teachers are paid in a way, or they're allowed to get more pay by engaging in activities like getting more degrees. But the research doesn't tell us that getting another degree helps you be more effective with kids. So we would like to see the system that would incentivize them to do the things that would make them more effective with kids. We'd like those two things to line up.
And how is that different from what we currently have?
Well, what we currently have is what's commonly known as steps and columns. You get more money if you stay in the system longer, which is just your annual raises or however often those come around. But then to move over to get into a new pay category, you have to go get a degree or some sort of higher education credential. And again, like I said, the research doesn't show any correlation between those degrees and better outcomes for kids. So the way we would envision it is that a teacher would sit down with their administrator, a principal, or somebody in the building, and they would have a discussion with one another about what's needed for that building. For what do kids in that building need? Are there a lot of ELL children in that building? And if so, do they have enough ELL teachers? And if they don't, maybe that's what that person should be pursuing as far as extra activity to become better at their profession. And then for that, they should be compensated for that extra activity.
Yeah, so it sounds like you'd like to better target the kind of education our educators have to get in order to advance in their career.
Yeah, I'd like to, exactly. It should be aligned with the needs of the student population, and the way we believe you can do that best is by having the teachers working with the principals in their building. They understand what the student population needs are in that building, and they can work to attain higher credentials or more credentials based on the needs of those kids in that building.
And I'm sure there are folks out there who react with, well, that sounds fine and dandy, but how are you going to pay for that? Especially after 2015 and the revenue raising tax reform package that was supposed to magically fix public education, and yet here we are today.
Yeah, well, of course, anytime you talk about education and you talk about having to pay more, then you're going to get those reactions. Our organization, we've never really talked about the money in the system. We've never talked about whether you need more or less. We've always come from the point of view that whatever money is there needs to be spent well. We've kind of moved from that a little bit in the most recent past, because we do realize that if we're going to ask professionals to do more, spend more time at their craft, spend more time perfecting their craft so that they can do more for children, then you need to pay them like professionals. Now, there was a recent study out, and it's been validated that for the most part, the people in the education profession, teachers particularly, they make about 60% of what other industries or other professionals in other industries make with similar education levels. Now, there's some evidence that maybe when you add in all of their package, or all their pay package, that it's a little more than 60%, but it's still less than what they could make doing something in the private sector. So if we want to have folks in this industry that are willing to put in the time and effort and energy it takes to deliver what we need for kids, then as a community, as a state, we need to be willing to pay them for that. 90% of all the money we spend on education goes to people, whether it's in the form of salaries, health care, or retirement benefits, but the whole package ends up being about 90% of what we spend. If we're going to make any changes that are going to have an impact for kids, then it's going to have to be with the people in the system. And in our opinion, we don't support them enough yet for them to do their job well. That lack of support is evidenced in all the things that you hear about, from too many hours, having to buy their own pencils or supplies. There's a million different ways that lack of support shows up. We believe if you change the systemic supports, though, that those issues are handled at the school level.
Well, and this gets to perhaps the most common misperception from the 2015 tax and education package, which was most people not realizing that that the bulk of the new revenue, that became new funding for public education, went into special categories. And of course, this is the argument being made by some folks at CCSD that, well, because we're not getting new money into our general fund, that's why we have this massive deficit. So, do you see issues, do you see problems with the way we fund public education in terms of, categorical funding versus what we put into the general fund, and how we distribute this money, geographically?
Yeah, well, so underway right now in Nevada, we're moving from categorical funding to weighted funding. The reason the categorical funding was used in 2015 is that in order for the taxpayers to agree through their representatives that they were willing to pay more for education, they wanted some assurances that it would go to specific things like helping the ELL population, helping the free and reduced lunch population specifically. But that did do exactly what you said. It meant that those dollars were used for new people to implement new programs, and they weren't available to give raises to the people who are already there. So every category that you put money into means a new program for a child. It means they're getting good things for that child, but it also means that anybody that isn't part of that new category can't get money from that category. So it was, while we did raise taxes, and it did go to schools, and it did go to programs that are having an impact, it wasn't available to fund the shortfall that exists today. And so both things are true. To the heart of your question, yes, I do think we need to make a change. I think that a weighted funding formula, which we are moving to, and by 2022 by law we have to have fully implemented, which includes weights for special needs children, for ELL children, for free and reduced lunch children, and for gifted and talented children. If we fund the schools based on the number of those kinds of students they have in them, then if we're funding those children to the right amount, those schools will have enough money to provide that education. But we will still come to this problem. We will still find, probably, in my opinion, that even if we pick a weight at one point in time, that weight might not be the weight necessary 2, 3, 4 years down the road. we will still have an expanding need. So along with more money has to come a rethinking of what we expect from the profession. And I don't want anybody to mistake this. It's not that the people in the profession today aren't giving 100%. Obviously, in every profession, some do and some don't. But by and large, the teachers we know work really hard, and they do give everything they have. The challenge is, though, that we are not maximizing the potential of every teacher. Mm-hmm. The way I like to talk about it is if you have a first-year teacher and maybe a 15th-year teacher, a maximum effort of a first-year teacher, they may be putting in all the hours you would expect and doing everything they can and have their heart in the right place. They still may not even approach 50% of what a 15-year teacher can do at barely even showing up, right? Because they have so much knowledge and so much understanding, they're able to do the right things for their kids with their eyes closed. Well, what we have to do is we have to take this knowledge that these people have and we have to use it to supplement what these folks don't have. And that's what our system doesn't do very well today. We don't allow for the young folks to learn from the older folks. We don't allow for the collaboration. And it's not that we say don't collaborate. It's just that the day isn't set up in a way where they can actually do it. The time isn't allocated in a way where it can happen. And so it doesn't naturally flow. You have to have a principal who's willing to kind of innovate and go against the system to make that happen in their school. We want it to be the other way around. We want principals that encourage this kind of behavior to be rewarded and have the system work with them to make it happen more.
So how do we actually get this? How do we actually get there and implement this where we encourage more of this type of collaboration in schools?
Well, our belief is that the first thing we need to do is educate the community so that they understand where we're falling short. And that'll mean persuading in some cases, because I don't know that everybody is going to agree with everything I just said. Mm-hmm. First, we have to find out if we can get some agreement on that the educators really are the key thing. We believe all the research says so, but we've got to get the community to believe that. And then you have to take the next step and say, okay, if the educators are the thing, what are we missing about that? And we believe that what we're missing is the systemic supports, the professional growth systems, the compensation, the licensure process, all the things that incentivize teachers and principals, all educators, to do the things that are in the system's best interest. So they're both winning. And then if you can convince people that that's the case and that that's necessary, then you have to talk about the money. And you have to say, hey, as a community in Nevada, are we willing to pay professional salaries, enough money to have the people in the profession work professionally? Mm-hmm. And look, I'm not pretending that this is going to be easy, but it has been done. There are examples. The most prominent example is Ontario, Canada. They took an approach similar to this about 15 years ago now. And if you look at what they had in 2003 versus what they have today, they used to have what we have, and now they're one of the most widely respected education systems in the entire world, because they decided, they made one real declaration when they started. They basically said this, that if a school's failing, it's not because the educators want it to fail, it's because they don't know how to succeed. And when they said that, they basically stopped the finger pointing and the saying that, well, you must not care or you're just not doing enough. And they said, how can we help? How can we help you succeed in your job? And ultimately the help is from their peers. The peers that have been in the profession longer, peers that have had that education, the peers that understand how to make it work, and they share their practice and their time with those that don't have it, and you raise the aggregate level of capacity within the folks that you actually have, and you can pay them for doing that.
And then finally, how would you like to actually bring everyone to the table to have this conversation, see if you can get everyone on the same page? Because you have conservatives who argue we already spend too much on our schools, it's big government gone crazy. You have progressives asking, why can't we properly fund our schools? Why aren't we actually giving teachers the support they need. You have administrators who are battling with the teachers and their union. You have teachers and the teachers' unions arguing that teachers are not getting the level of support they need.
Well, the way that we think you have to start, and this is what we are doing as an organization, is you just start having the conversations. I mean, this interview is part of it. You have to reach out to the people who are talking about these issues, and you have to make your platform known. We're reaching out also to legislators. We're reaching out to educators. We're reaching out to the business community, and we're talking about these issues in the languages that they understand. So with the business community, we're talking about it in a way that says, look, if our community is going to grow, and if your businesses are going to have, well, even an employee pool, but customers, employees, then we need to have an educated workforce. We need to have a community that can thrive. Your businesses need to be able to recruit people from other parts of the country, and in order for them to come here, they're going to want to believe that their kids are going to good schools. So there's a definite interest on their part, clearly on the union's part, for their members to be paid more professionally is exactly what they exist to do. So I think you get great support from them on that, and I doubt that they're going to have any problem supporting professionalizing measures, getting systemic changes that actually give those folks the opportunities they need to practice their profession at a high level. So I'm not as pessimistic, maybe because the politics of it aren't as important to me. I know that they matter in the end, but I think if you have the conversations with people and you show them how what you're trying to accomplish can benefit their group, and it doesn't have to mean that it's a disadvantage to the other group, then you can start to find common ground, and we can start to get to where something like this can take place. But the first challenge is putting this on the table for folks to evaluate and to determine if they really believe that it is the right kind of work. And that's what we're just now starting to do. We believe it is. We believe the research is pretty undeniable, that if you're not focusing on the human beings, the human talent in the classroom, the teachers and the administrators and the support staff, then you're really probably not going to do much in the long run to affect things for kids. So that's the beginning of it. We got to get people to even agree to that first, and then we can start having some of those political conversations.